Hello, my name is Dennis Seatsma, Dennis John Seatsma Productions, Homestead, Florida, USA. Today is Saturday, 2026, August 15th, 2026, and this video is for my Facebook group 2101 Retired, which is for retired technical people of all specialties for FAA and management and logistics. We called it supply. All of you specialists that are retired and family members are welcome to join my group. Now, I've been contemplating doing a video and an article for the Facebook group. I find if I do a video, it does the typing for me. And then I could copy the text into and post both the video and the article to 2101 Retired, FAA Retired Technicians. We used to call it Airways Facilities, and then they called it Tech Ops, and then Air Traffic is called Tech Ops, and it's... Anyway, I started with FAA in 1974 with a degree from a local community college in the cooperative education program, where you had to work as a college intern, an engineering aide, GS3, for FAA for a term of college, and then you'd go to college for a term. And you weren't supposed to work during the college term, but the bills wouldn't stop. So when I wasn't working for FAA, I worked in a TV and radio repair shop, or I bagged groceries, or I worked for cable TV as a lineman and installer and studio tech. But to tell my story about the first day at FAA, I have to digress to my Scottish and Dutch ancestors who came to this country a long time ago and settled. I don't know why they left Holland or Scotland, but they settled in the Midwest and in Middle Canada and in New York and Chicago. And some, I think, went out to St. Louis, because that's what people did, is they wanted to go west. And the west was as far out as St. Louis until they finished the railroad coast to coast. But anyway, my ancestors had really strong work ethic. On my mother's side, when the Strowger was invented, that did away with the switchboard operators and eventually evolved into number 5 crossbar, and telephonery after that went to ESS and what have you. FAA had a system that was similar to number 5 crossbar called 301. But anyway, my grandmother on my mother's side was a switchboard operator back when you had to route calls, and it was tip and ring telephonery, or battery and ground, 48 volts, however you want to say it. And the telephone lines were strung like telegraph wires, only instead of a pair of wires for telegraph, they'd have multiple pairs for telephonery. And grandmother eventually became a supervisor, and then she came down with early onset dementia, sadly, and Alzheimer's. So her career was cut short by those things. My grandfather was a postal carrier on my mother's side. So when my father was growing up, my dad was a really good man, and he was a pacifist, and he studied Roman history, and he did not want to go to war and become cannon fodder for a unwinnable war, as they did with Roman troops, to impress people with what Rome could do. And how many lives were lost or how much blood was spilled didn't matter, as long as they made their point as the Roman Empire. So my father, initially, he was thought to be slow. He couldn't see. They didn't test vision in the early grades. And when they discovered in the 3rd grade that he couldn't see the blackboard and he needed glasses, that's when he they realized that he had potential to be an academic that was never really developed fully because he got drafted. But before he went there, he went to a Votech school to Pullman Tech on the south side of Chicago when he worked for Federal Sign and Siren, and he worked for General Mills as a boxcar filler and cereal and what have you. But at Federal Sign and Siren, my father was paid by piecework. So he did an employee suggestion that gave better production. And he was a hero for a time. And I guess that's where I got the employee suggestion gene, is if you save management money or you increase production, not only are you a hero with management, but also your colleagues, because if they were paid by piecework, the more unbroken pieces due to a machining error or a method of machining made you more money. And so anyway, he did Federal Sign and Siren, and he was drafted and sent to South Korea. And they realized my father was intelligent, so they put him in training. And he was really good at math, so they put him in training for the howitzer. Now, during World War II, my grandfather, growing up on the south side of Chicago and a member of the Dutch Reformed Church, he didn't want to get in trouble with law enforcement, which was easy to do on the south side of Chicago during those years of bootlegging and machine guns and all those things that went on in Chicago during Prohibition. So he noticed a lot of people hanging around the print shop, so he got a job as an apprentice that led up. At the peak of his capacity, he went back to school to learn lithography. My grandfather did, which made him an expert at map making in Chicago. So during World War II, my grandfather helped make maps, and his work was so important to the war effort that he had 24-hour FBI protection for his lithography work, because the reconnaissance photos would be taken over Europe, shipped through England to New York, and then to Chicago quickly as possible, and then made into maps for military use. Having a little trouble speaking, so please forgive me. My fluidity is going away with age for some reason. And, no diagnosis yet. But my father did well in the Army and got out as quick as he could. And people that stayed in for the benefits got recalled to the Korean War, and a lot of them didn't survive. But my dad and my mother, it's a beautiful love story. They met in third grade. They reconnected in high school, and my mother, she was very fond of my father. He was a good-looking guy at 16, and handsome young man. And anyway, he got through the war and got married and had a family as soon as he could in 1950, I think it was. And he needed a job, so his mother-in-law, my grandmother on my mother's side, said, "Why don't you apply to the phone company and see if they hire you?" Well, he did. And he worked outside initially for Blue Island and Tinley Park and, offices on the south side of Chicago until he ended up in the central office as a number 5 crossbar switchman, which he had a gift for. My dad had a genius at central office stuff. He just really good at it, which led to a job in Homestead, Florida later, after he worked the loop office. And he had a passion for solving problems the other switchmen couldn't solve. And the same thing in Homestead. But sadly, my dad's health failed in 1974. He got in a car accident, and it revealed underlying health conditions of problem with triglycerides and cholesterol, and he had the blockages of the veins that caused his brain not to get enough oxygen, and he had transient ischemic attacks known as mini strokes or silent strokes. So the way he got the job in Homestead was interesting. He was on vacay in Hollywood, New Year's Eve, 1967, and we had a friend who was a member of the Chamber of Commerce and the Elks and the Moose, and anyway, big party, New Year's Eve. And my dad was sad because my mother was really adamant that she didn't want to retire in Chicago. And about that time, all my relatives were leaving Roseland and the south side of Chicago for places in Palm Beach, or, my grandparents on my father's side moved to Briny Breezes, just a little bit south of the Kennedy compound, near the port there. And Briny Breezes is all they could afford. And they built a house, and it has since been overbuilt by other complex. And my grandmother told me what was going to happen. They had very few property rights except to build the original building for, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 1 car garage on a spit lot within walking distance of the beach in Briny Breezes on Ocean Drive. I think it was 25 Ocean Drive was the address. So grandfather and grandmother moved there in 68. Grandfather died tragically in 74. Same year FAA hired me, in the same year my dad had his car accident. So I had a lot of traumatic events in my life in 74, but the good thing was FAA hired me as a college intern, and I got that on a lark. I was walking by the desk on career day, and I threw my name in a hat, and my grades were good. I was graduating top of my class at Miami-Dade Miami-Dade College, formerly Miami-Dade Community College. And I went on to study electrical engineering technology at Florida International University, but I didn't need the degree by that time because I was well into my career with FAA by the end of 1975, 74, 75. And fortunately, the first supervisor I had was a genius electrical engineer, and he was really overqualified to be FAA management, but he started in Atlanta, and he decided he wanted to move to Miami. Russell G. Wicker. And Russ, if you're out there, God love you, man. You helped my career so much. But Russ was a electrical engineer of some reputation and well-liked by the FAA Atlanta office. But he went to Miami, and they decided at some point they didn't have enough engineers in Atlanta. So they recalled all the engineers back to the regional office, and Russ didn't want to go at the time. So he decided to become a supervisor. And when I first went to work for him, he asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, well, I hoped to parlay the job with FAA. I had some idea that I wanted to be an entrepreneurial type and an inventor and not work for government. So I was going to springboard the government job into private sector. But I didn't tell Russ that. I told him I wanted to learn as much from him as I could and learn to invent circuits and design circuits that worked and were reliable and bulletproof. So he says, oh, I've got an idea for you. Actually, I'm going to task you to do these. And I said, fine. I relished the idea to be honored with learning from Russell G. Wicker. And he's a ham radio guy if he's still with us, if he hasn't gone to God's celestial shore yet in heaven. Russ, if you're out there, howdy, howdy. But anyway, he put me underneath Willie Spargo, who was a Pan Am employee, and he hated the private sector. And he said, man, hold on to this job like you hold on to your life. Don't lose this FAA job, because you can make a minor mistake and get in Dutch with management and be out. So watch it. And he taught me all he could about Model 28 teletype and the ASR and whatever. So I got real popular at the Miami Flight Service Station, because me and a couple of colleagues that, I won't mention names because they might not like it, but some of them really helped me learn teletype, Model 20 and the later teletype system. So anyway, I'm trying to get this video done. This is part one of many parts, but for leading up to my first day at FAA and my FAA career after that, which I would love to find some work that I can do at this time using my skills and experience that I'll talk about a little bit more. But for now, this is good for part one. You know how I got on board with FAA and my ancestors, how they beat the Nazis. My grandfather was a lithographer and map maker. My grandmother was a hard-working person at the telephone company. My father did well at the telephone company. And my mother, she had to go into being a private businesswoman because her temperament didn't allow her to work for any, at some point we all have to work for somebody else, but as soon as she could, she started her own business. And she was a cosmetologist, and she had her own beauty shop. And as sole proprietor in a remote, or I shouldn't say remote, it was a difficult niche place where they wanted to have a barbershop and beauty shop that was walkable in the town. And my father got into politics and parlayed that. And it was a great business for my mother until the family transitioned away from Chicago to Homestead. So in part two, I'll pick up my life in Homestead, and then eventually how that led to my first day at FAA and the employee suggestion system with FAA and my many employee suggestions that were coupled with National Airspace Systems, NAS, change proposals to engineering, that many of those got peer review in the employee suggestion system approved, and then the NCP got approved by FAA engineering, and then lastly by FAA management that had to come up with the funding. And some of the best stuff that we did, I say we because I had other colleagues helping, other FAA colleagues, it led into us doing work in Puerto Rico and the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos and all over Florida, and then in Georgia, and then I helped online nationally with the stuff we were doing. And I'll get into the stuff later in later parts. So this is part one, and this is the introduction video. Since I've retired, I've gotten into doing some social media on YouTube. I have a channel that's my name, Dennis Sytsma, or Dennis John Sytsma, spelled correctly, Sytsma. And genealogically, I'm told by relatives that on the Dutch side, we date back to Friesland, Holland. And I haven't researched the mother side, and I'm loath to say maiden names, but so I'm not going to. But the genealogists on the Sytsma side shared with me a lot of information. A lot of the Sytsmas went into academics and religion, the Dutch Reformed Church, the Presbyterian Church, counseling of all types, life coaching, a lot of them had vocational skills, really good at being electricians and what have you, or in the radio and TV repair business when it was at its peak in the 60s and the 70s, when everybody would throw money at you to fix a color TV or a CB radio or ham radio, marine radio, or abate an FCC citation. And at 1974, I acquired an FCC first-class radio telephone license that I used to abate radio interference problems, radio frequency, RFI. I love doing RFI work. It was fun. We would do the fox hunts, and we'd find the culprit. And a lot of time it had to do with the licensing and intermods when they put transmitters too close together. You know, the licensing might say, they're 27 miles apart, but they were granted a temporary and decided to make it permanent, and FCC didn't take notice until FAA Spectrum got involved. And after Spectrum got involved, then I got involved, and had a lot of fun working with Spectrum. Spectrum people were great folks. But their data was based on the licensing, and a lot of times people did things that weren't according to the licensing. So that led into FAA want me to be a increasing NAS knowledge Inc. instructor, which I declined. Too much travel. I didn't want to be in constant travel. Travel enough in technical support and for the union was enough. I didn't want to do that. And I was a district rep for the Professional Airway System Specialist for years, 5 or 7 years. I don't remember the exact dates. I should have kept taking notes. Took notes on everything else. But the union stuff, I didn't document how many years I was a rep for an SSC office or a unit office, or I did pass rep work for a long time before I became the district rep for Miami San Juan. And I was on the national modernization teams for FAA too. They called it the Nut. The Nut. I was on the Nut team. Yeah, national whatever. I don't know what NUT stands for. I can't remember. But it was during the Free Flake Phase 1 years and the CPDLC implementation years and the replacement of the ARTSI system to DSR. We went a quantum leap in technology, and that was done with a lot of contract support by Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. But I was involved in all those things one way or the other, either as a union negotiator or on the implementation teams. A lot of meetings in LA and in Palm Springs, Longmont, Colorado, and I can't tell you how many times I went to the FAA Tech Center or Washington, D.C. headquarters for meetings, or out to NOCC near Dulles, and they might be relocated now, I don't know. Leesburg Center, went there once. Meetings a lot in Atlanta. A lot of FAA headquarters at the district office in Atlanta. So, had a real interesting career with FAA, but I'll get eventually to the first day at FAA and then deeper into that later, because this is the part 1 introduction for my 2101 group audience. And, you know, in this segment, I should have talked more about working for AmeriCable, first as a studio technician for an after-school project after working AV in high school and junior high school. I had a proclivity for drama club, and I did a little acting here and there in junior high and high school, and talent shows and what have you. And my singing was not very good, and my guitar playing was even worse. But I tried it in junior high at Homestead Junior High formerly Homestead High School, and now it's Homestead Middle School. And he's changing the names of everything, but it's the same facility in Homestead. And in high school, I worked under Mr. Hoffman, who he wanted me to go to Lindsay Hopkins because but it was so hard to get from Homestead to downtown Miami to Lindsay Hopkins Vote Tech in those years. It was really rough traffic, horrible traffic to get from Homestead. So anyway, I went to Miami-Dade College South, which is in Kendall, and graduated from South with a degree in electronics technology initially. They've since renamed the degree electrical engineering technology because all of the community colleges and all of them had to come in sync with the universities like Florida International. And FIU in 1974 was electronics engineering technology. And by adding the word technology, it means that you're a person that can install electronics equipment and be a liaison. You're well enough educated to talk turkey to the design engineers at the factory and tell them what you see in the field and how to improve product through the engineering chain as baseline changes to the engineering, as opposed to consumer complaints. And a lot of corporations would do well if they had a pipeline like that, from an EET to the formal engineering people that are done in cubicles and not in the field. And I could talk a little more about FAA engineering, but the engineers in Oklahoma City are really isolated, or were isolated, from seeing the field failures. And I would try to feed information through the pipeline from my level in technical support to the engineering office in Atlanta back to Oklahoma City. And a lot of the employee suggestions and NCPs that I sent in or initiated never made it to Oklahoma. And that was told to me by one of the engineers. Where's this been for the last 20 years? I said, well, I submitted it in 1991. You haven't seen it yet? In 2005, all of a sudden, they were interested in it. And I said, well, it's been in the system in the archives forever, and I didn't want to get in trouble politically by pushing it and getting the other engineers upset with me, because they've got enough to do with what their managers task them to do. And I couldn't convince management that it was worthy of the engineering time, because they had matrices where they had to answer to FAA headquarters. And if it wasn't on the matrix, it wasn't important. So anyway, I appreciated, that was explained to me by a number of managers, that, Dennis, we'd love to look at it, but we don't have time. We don't have resources. And I like, well, if I write the White House, they say, do that. Maybe they'll give us resources. And maybe we can do some of these things. But for now, we have to answer to our matrix. Because our annual evaluations as managers are based on the matrix, not what Dennis says. And I understand authority and power and protocol and policy and, so anyway, but I think the employee suggestion bug started with me with my dad's story about his success at Federal Sign and Siren as a peace worker while attending his technical school at Pullman Tech. Now was a situation with Votech. Votech was in elementary schools. They always had a wood shop and a power shop for people that wanted to learn that stuff. You could take it as an elective in elementary school, in junior high, high school, college. Co-op is a VOTEC, cooperative education, because I did that in high school. High school, I spent some time in the classroom. Once I finished all of my mandated state of Florida required coursework, and it was all approved, and I had electives, and I chose co-op, which they let me out of school at 10 a.m. to go work at AmeriCable as a studio tech, which they said, "Hey kid, you want to make some money?" And I said, "Sure." And they put a shovel in my hand as a ditch digger. So I dug ditches, and I learned construction that way, digging ditches. And then they said, "You want to make more money, kid?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We got a telephone pole out back. Learn to climb it with spurs before bucket trucks." So I learned how to climb a telephone pole with spurs. And then they said, "Kid, you want to make more money? We'll put you on line construction." So I became part of a line crew. And if that cable flipped up into power, I could have been electrocuted. So just being on the ground crew next to that big cable of carrier wire, if it flipped into power, you could die. So we had to learn safety procedures that linemen needed to know. So at that point, they said, "Kid, you want to make more money?" And I said, "Sure." So they said, "Well, how do you feel about working in people's homes as an installer?" And I said, "Fine." So I started, and I love talking to old people and hearing all their stories. And the old men love to tell stories. And the gratuities that came from just listening was pretty good. And the feedback to the office, to the general manager, was great. Because, they're saying, "Oh, that guy Dennis was out here, and a very nice young man." Of course, I was a lot thinner then and a lot younger, 17 years old. And I learned a lot. And some of the guys at AmeriCable had been in the military service before they became linemen. And then the general manager, he says, "Well, you seem to be popular as an installer. How do you feel about being a door-to-door salesman?" And I said, "Great." So they gave me door hangers. And I didn't even talk to people. I just went through a neighborhood and just put door hangers with my name stamped on it, Dennis Seatsma. And they'd call a general manager saying, "I got this door hanger and Dennis Seatsma was here." And I got a commission on every one of those. I'd come into work, and Jerry said, "You got 5 more commissions, Dennis. Would you like to go into another neighborhood?" And, if they called me, I'd explain that, back then in 1973, it was analog cable. We had 12 channels, only 3 of them watchable, and 2 UHF channels that had local programming. And as a studio tech, I had to actually order the local programming and put it into a 8mm Bell and Howell projector going into a color camera. And that's when I got the bug that I really wanted to learn how to repair color TV cameras, because they had to hire a specialist to come into the studio. And I watched the guy, and I was amazed that he knew all these little knobs to twist and the grid and the mirrors and all this stuff that made a projector work in 1973. And all that technology's history now. It's all gone. We have better stuff now. Well, for the introduction video, this is 34 minutes, so I'm going to end this with my first day at FAA. But in the next segment, we'll talk about meeting Russell Wicker and my FAA colleagues and the district manager, sector manager, who was a waterman. He loved being on the water in the Florida Keys. And he had a 50-foot yacht. And he knew a lot about things marine. And he sent me out to the Biscayne Vortex when we had to go out on a 28-foot Bertram with twin Crusaders big V8 powerful engines, inboards. And I had to learn how to captain that craft, and I had to take a Coast Guard training for FAA to allow me to drive that boat solo, which I had to do many times to get from Key Biscayne out to the Vortac. The Vortac was destroyed in 1992 by Hurricane Andrew, August 24th, 1992. It did major damage. And I think I could have fixed it if they'd given me new antennas and a new roof at Biscayne. But politically, the FAA didn't want that. They wanted to relocate the facility because the federal lease expired in the year 2000. And there was a lot of political pressure because Biscayne Vortac was near Stiltsville. And Stiltsville was privately owned and very unpopular with the National Park Service people. They really wanted Stiltsville to go away. And it did. In the years since 1992, Park Service, Biscayne National Park, assumed ownership of a lot of it. And I think there might be one or two Stiltsville, I could be mistaken, that still are privately owned. But, that is an environmentally sensitive area and great for snorkeling and scuba diving. And I've been scuba diving from Miami to Key West ever since 1974 when I first got open water certified. And I've been diving around the world, but that's another story for another time. And I think that's enough for now. Enough for now for my 2101 FAA retired audience. And I have other social media groups. I've got a General Motors 4L60E transmission group that's real popular. I don't know, people are applying like 50 to 100 a day to that group to join it. General Motors made a very large number of those transmissions in 3 generations that I know of. And I say generations because you have the baseline engineering from 1993, and then they changed the baseline engineering slightly in 1995, and then they changed the baseline engineering again in 2007. And I don't know what they did after 2007. I'm not that deep into it yet. But I'm still working on trying to learn the first generation and the differences, the delta in the engineering changes between the 3 generations of 4L60E transmissions. And I'm on the hunt in salvage yards right now on this date, which is, what day is it? It's Saturday, August 15th, 2026. And I hope to find a Generation 1 4L60E and modernize it, because there's a lot of kits out by aftermarket people like Sonics, who make kits for transmissions, and Transco, and many, many others make transmission products. Tomco, I think, makes some. Tomco's a real small company, but unless I'm mistaken, excuse me, Tomco, if I misspeak. But all this stuff is neat, I think. It's fascinating how the transmissions morphed. Because modern transmissions today have multiple speeds and are highly efficient, used in big trucks for the best fuel efficiency. And the physics in those transmissions are incredible. Between the hydraulics and the electronics and the software, and it's amazing what they're doing in the big trucks. And for modern vehicles, private vehicles. And a lot of that technology is somehow transitioning to the electrics, but for now, the other Facebook I have is a 3.7 liter Mercruiser, which was an engine made from 1976 until 1989, and it was considered to be a terrible engine in its years of production. But that's because people didn't know how to work on it. And Mercruiser did all they could to communicate out to their audiences the best they could with that before the internet, because production ended in 1989, and internet really didn't come around until 1991, and a lot of people weren't really using the internet till after 95, 96. So as the engineering changed, the ability to communicate technical information out to the audiences. Now, the service bulletins from Mercruiser went to the dealers, and were not really well read by the techs. So people worked on those engines in ignorance and would destroy an engine not knowing about service bulletin 81-30. 81-30's got a lot of good stuff in it. And anyway, since I started that Facebook group and a YouTube channel with videos to match the chronic problems with chronic solutions and the aftermarket fixes like Breeze Marines in St. Petersburg, Kevin over there makes a aftermarket alternator kit, and he's done changes to his baseline engineering as he saw the need. So his early kits were not as good as the kits you'd buy from him today, which he has a high mount and a low mount kit to accommodate the power steering. If, not all the 3.7s had power steering, but the 3.7s, when they came out in 1976, had a terrible electrical system, and the rectifier regulators were not switching type because they weren't available in 76. And they were clamping type regulators, which generated tons of heat. And the first design was air-cooled in an enclosed area that didn't have a lot of ventilation. So it was a fail initially in 1976. All of the 3.7s were burning up rectifier regulators. So quickly they changed the baseline engineering to water-cooled. Well, the initial engineering of the 3.7s had a 3-inch heat exchanger and air-cooled. Well, they went to a 4-inch heat exchanger and a water-cooled that initially had a 5/8 inch pipe going through it, and cooled it with water from the sea, seawater, not, and it's a closed cooling system engine. It's got antifreeze in it. All of the 3.7s were closed cooling because it's aluminum block, and if you ran seawater through that in 1976, it wasn't good. So Mercruiser went to a 3/4 inch rectifier rig, but they never went away from the clamping regulator, which was not efficient compared to an alternator. So Kevin came out with the alternator kits that are very efficient. And using a marine alternator, he went to 62 amps instead of 40 amps. Well, about this time, CDI Electronics in Huntsville, Alabama, the founder, Ray Anders, he noticed what was going on, and he says, I'll come out with my own, because that was how Ray got started. He started repairing electronic ignitions for marine engines in a company he called Raypair initially. And then it became CDI Electronics, and CDI is huge now. They have a huge product line in Huntsville, Alabama, USA. And Ray said, I'll cut the guts out of this thing, and I'll put my own switching, because by the time Ray got around, they were microprocessor-controlled switching regulators, which were as efficient as alternators. So I went on my boat and I bought Ray Anders' system of an improved rectifier regulator and stator, which is used on motorcycles. Like the Triumph motorcycles all had electrical problems because they had the same situation. They didn't have a good rectifier regulator. And the Harley Davidsons, they avoided this problem by using generators instead of using the stator and the Hondas all had the flywheel magnets like an outboard, like the Evinrudes and the what was the other one? The Johnsons and the Evinrudes. They all had flywheels, and a lot of power engines like the Kohler power engines for lawnmowers, they have magnets that can come loose, just like the 3.7 has magnets that can come loose and destroy your stator. So anyway, as an electrical engineer, I understand all this stuff. And on my boat, I've got the CDI electronics. But since then, a lot of people have told me they love the alternator kit that Kevin does in St. Pete. Well, Kevin and I talk all the time. And I admire, he's a real savvy businessman. And what he's done with the alternator kits is impressive because other companies came out with the alternator kits. You can buy an alternator kit from several different other vendors other than Kevin at breezeworks.net online. .net, breezeworks, and breeze is spelled with a Z. Anyway, Kevin is a heck of an entrepreneurial type. And when I was working in the TV and radio repair shop, I had a chance to become an entrepreneurial type because the guy next to me on the bench taught me how to repair color TVs because he was a real nice guy and he saw me struggling to fix CB radios. Piecework, $7.50 a radio, $7.50 for every CB I fixed, or $25 for every marine radio I fixed. Well, the guy on the bench, his name was Jerry. And Jerry, I didn't know it, but he was an aerospace engineer that got laid off from when Apollo 18 funding dried up. I didn't understand what an aerospace engineer was when I was that age in 1973. So Jerry says, "Hey kid, you'll get $42.50 for every color TV you fix, and we got tons of them. So you're not taking work away from me." So I started working on color TVs and making $42.50 piecework, every one I fixed. And it was a big deal if you fixed something and it came back to the shop bad, because the owner had already paid you. And if the client wasn't happy, then the shop's reputation went downhill. So the owner, Larry would be all over you if anything came back. So you had to test the color TVs extensively, like leave them in the shop burning 24/7 on the local TV stations to make sure that they were really fixed before they went back to the client. And of course, the client's saying, "Why is it in the shop so long?" I said, "Well, we're testing it. Do you want to take it back and not know and you test it?" And some clients would say, "Yeah." But, anyway, that was then, 1973 technology. And thank goodness now we got these really nice TVs. Technology has come a long, long way since 1973 with the vacuum tube TVs. But anyway, Jerry wanted to start a company, Oceanic Technology Systems, OTS, and he did it. I can't believe he makes the world's best underwater communicator that are bought by all these governments all around the world. Anyway, that's enough for now. Thanks for watching. Thumbs up, people. Anything good.